Hello, everybody. This is Gary Vitacco-Robles of Marilyn Behind the Icon podcast. And joining me this evening, our very special guest is
Betsy Brett.
And Betsy Brett is owner of Immortal Marilyn Fan Club, which is a fan club with the longest online presence. And Immortal Marilyn is dedicated to preserving the memory of Marilyn Monroe in a manner in which she would be honored. The group has a presence in Facebook. It has a website which is under construction. And originally, the group was an online message board, so it has really evolved over the decades. And the mission of Immortal Marilyn is to respect Marilyn as a woman, a remarkable woman, and to educate folks on the truth of who she really was and to dispel misinformation. So there was very exciting news on August 1st when Leslie Kasperowitz announced that Betsy Brett would be taking over the helm of Immortal Marilyn. So I'm very honored that Betsy has allowed us to facilitate her first social media interview as the leader and owner of Immortal Marilyn. So welcome, Betsy.
Oh, thank you, Gary.
So glad that you're with us. So I always love to begin these interviews with what helped you discover Marilyn? How did it all begin? How did this relationship all begin? How old were you when that happened?
I'm pretty sure I was 10, I think. I was visiting, well, my family was visiting my sister, and she wasn't feeling well, and they were all concentrating on her, and I was kind of being ignored. But so I was trying to find something to do, and she had a book on her coffee table, and it was The Joy of Marilyn by Sam Shaw.
I know that book, 1980. I love that book.
Actually, I have it here. I will show it. This is the original copy. This is the copy I looked at because she gave it to me.
And there it is, that very rare picture that we've never seen thereafter in the blue sundress.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful book.
One day we'll see it again in another form. But so I leafed through it, and all I knew was there was this really pretty lady, and I have a feeling that my thought at that age was probably just, she's so pretty, I wish I could look like her.
To a 10-year-old, sure.
Yeah, and I didn't have any perception of her being the incredible star that she was. But anyhow, so I looked at it that day, and I was quite fascinated, but the name didn't really mean anything to me, and I went about my business. But I didn't forget it, but I don't recall actually looking at it again. But then a year or two later, my parents and I were in the car on a road trip, and we had just picked up the mail, and Life magazine, August 1982, was there.
Yes.
And they passed it back to me. I'm not sure if they would have if they'd realized. I mean, they were
pictures were in it.
Yes, well, they weren't super revealing, but I was pretty sheltered. But they passed it back because they thought maybe that would interest me and keep me occupied. And they were fascinating. And I don't think I made the connection quite yet that this was the same woman.
Same lady.
But, yeah. But I think my interest there was that these pictures are rather risque. But I also read that she had died not too long after these pictures were taken, and I was just kind of like, how could this be? So that kind of gripped me. And then somewhere along the way, I brought the two together, and I started wanting to find out more.
Mm.
But that was difficult where I live because I live in Newfoundland in Canada, and our province is an island. So we don't get everything, even now, that everybody else does. We're always a little bit behind.
And I think you were telling me that you're actually closer to Great Britain than you are Los Angeles.
Oh, yes. Oh, definitely.
And I'm noticing in the room where you're seated, you have some really beautiful images of Marilyn, and one of them is a Sam Shaw with that beautiful amber necklace.
Yes. Yeah, it's one of my favorite pictures.
And the other one it's part of the series that was always my favorite, which was Milton Green's, we call it the graduation shot from the Test for the Prince and the Showgirl. Those are really two of my favorite images of Marilyn. So I think we have the same taste in her portraits. So what was your first Marilyn film where you discovered her as an actress and not the lady on the magazine page who looks so intriguing?
I'm not exactly sure when it was. It might have been the same summer that I saw the Life magazine. I'm not positive. Well, in my hometown, a very small town, it was hard to get video rentals at all. But in the city where we spent a part of our summer, all kinds of video stores. So I used to call around to all of the video stores. Do you have anything with Marilyn Monroe in it? I'm sure I tortured them. But I finally found one that had a video. And I even remember the exact store. Every time I pass by it, I think about it. It was The Prince and the Showgirl.
Oh.
And which is an unusual first movie, really, because it's not one of her big, well, they didn't have blockbusters back then, but, the equivalent. It wasn't like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes or The 7-Year Itch, which would have been the huge title.
The quintessential Monroe films, yeah.
Right. And I remember it was one of those Warner Brothers videotapes, so it had the old time movie going experience. So it had the newsreel and the trailers and a cartoon before the movie started.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Marilyn stole your heart in The Prince and the Showgirl.
Oh, well, I mean, the character of Elsie was just so sweet. And I don't know, like, even in years since, I still feel like what I did then, which was that character was very close to what Marilyn was actually like. Now, at that time, it was kind of just, you at that age, you kind of don't understand the acting concept quite as well as you do as an adult, and you kind of get that impression. But even since, it really feels like that's very close to her. Certainly the closest of all of her roles.
The films. I'd have to agree with you, and that was also the film that introduced me to Marilyn. And I know James Haspiel, who met Marilyn and knew Marilyn to some degree, he did come out and say that he felt that that film captured the closest essence to her real personality.
Oh,
and
wow.
I love Elsie. She's really smart. She's a diplomat who is able to bring opposing forces together and like save Europe from the beginning of the World War. So that's how you were introduced. So when you, and all that you have learned about Marilyn, all that you know about Marilyn, and in your moderations on the Facebook page where you administer, what's your favorite Marilyn story? What's the story close to your heart?
Actually, I'm going to name this one, and it's partly because part of the story is sort of new to me. At least I think it's new. Sometimes I hear things and I'm like, did I hear that before? And I've forgotten. So there's so much information. It's sort of like two anecdotes which make up a story.
Uh-huh.
When Marilyn was a little girl, she used to, I can't remember who she was staying with at the time, and you might remember, when she was dropped off down on Hollywood Boulevard to go spend the weekend at the movies. And she said in an interview that, well, she said you can't really blame them. They were working all week. They were very tired. They worked hard.
Probably the British couple.
British couple who probably, yes.
The space from her mom, yeah, after her mom was institutionalized, yeah.
Right. And so she'd spend the whole weekend at the movies, and she'd be there all day long, and she'd keep watching the same ones over and over again. And they'd have to come get her because she wouldn't even know that nighttime had come because she was still in the theater. But she talked about, and she would go to the Egyptian theater and the Chinese theater, both on Hollywood Boulevard. And of course, the Chinese theater has the famous courtyard with the hand and footprints of celebrities. So this was probably, I guess, mid 30s, a little bit later maybe. So there weren't a lot of hand and footprints, but she said that, and this is something that I always thought was, she must be mistaken, but she said that she used to try to fit her feet into the footprints that were there.
Yes.
And that her feet were too big. And I always thought, but she's a child. How could her feet be too big? But around that time, your prominent footprints probably would have been Jean Harlow, Gloria Swanson, and Mary Pickford, and they had very small feet. So, okay, it actually makes sense.
Very high heels.
Yes, that too.
And, so you saw the front of the shoe, and you saw the heel of the shoe, and it wasn't flat like a child's shoe. So
right.
It would reduce the footprint. Yeah.
Yeah. So she remembered that, and the interview where she talks about that, I've heard several times. It's on YouTube. So she said, yeah. So she would put her feet in, and then she'd be disappointed, and she'd say, "Well, I guess that's out because my feet don't fit."
That's a sweet story.
But then, years later, of course, in 1953, she was there with Jane Russell. It was promotion or publicity for Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and they got their hand and footprints in the cement themselves. And here's the thing that feels new to me, and I'm not sure where it came from, but apparently Marilyn looked at Jane and said, "Wow, this is for all time, isn't it?" And she said, "Oh, yes, honey, it's for all time, as long as that cement lasts." And that just, putting the two little pieces together is just such a sweet story. And it's sort of like, you know, the fact that she thought about the hand and footprints and then became one of the people there.
It came full circle. She didn't think she even fit, you know, trying to become a star or become a woman like these women, and she didn't think she would quite do it. And then in the end, she does it. It's there forever. And now she inspires other little boys and girls who fit their hands in her prints and wonder, can I do this? If she did this, maybe I can do this. Yeah, it's like, yes. It's just the cycle continues, and she offers that hope and inspiration.
And what's more, hers are, I'd say without a doubt, the most popular hand and footprints there. You know,
those handprints need cleaned, right? You can see the buildup of people putting their hands onto her hands. Yeah, I have to tell you, when I was out there many years ago, I brought some parchment paper and I covered it up and I did a rubbing. And it didn't take me very long to do the rubbing, but all the tourist buses had emptied out and they wanted to see these handprints. They were really upset that I was covering the prints for the show. I kept having to raise it so people can see and take pictures and then realign it again. And I became very aware of people coming to see her footprints more than any other in the 20 minutes that I was doing this rubbing.
Yeah, you almost always have to wait for at least a couple of people to have their turn before you get to, because when you get there, I don't know if I've ever seen it without somebody already there.
A crowd. What do you believe is Marilyn's greatest legacy and what she leaves behind? She leaves behind certainly the footprints and the handprints as the ultimate record of her presence on the planet. But what do you see as her great legacy all these years, these 58 years after her passing?
Well, the most obvious thing would be her films. You know, that's her work was so important to her. And the films, I mean, some of those titles are very significant in the classic movie realm. Forget about
Absolutely.
she's even in them. Just the films themselves, like even a couple of her early titles, The Asphalt Jungle and All About Eve. I mean, those
Yes.
are All About Eve. I think got the best picture, didn't it?
And a
Yes.
lot. I think it still rules. I think it tied maybe with Titanic, but 11 wins, maybe 14 nominations. That's huge.
It's, yeah, yeah, and it's probably the best well, at least one of the best depictions of stage life. And then of her own films, I mean, you know, the iconic skirt blowing. Even people who haven't seen the 7-Year Itch know that image.
Yes.
And well, my personal favorite, Some Like It Hot. American Film Institute named that as the best comedy of all time.
All time. Yes. And that's her Best Actress Golden Globe Award. A lot of people don't know that about that film, that she won the Golden Globe for her performance.
That's right. Yes. So and those, you know, the films are very important to the fans, I think. They're things that you know, we will haul out a film if we need to feel good or something like that. You know, we haul out one of the movies. I know for me,
What's your go-to Marilyn film to haul out when you need that spark?
it's almost always Some Like It Hot. Uh, if I stumble on it and it's on TV, I think, oh, what? I'll watch 5 minutes. There for the whole thing. Forget it. Unless I actually have to go somewhere. And it always lifts me up. I always still laugh out loud. And I even have the thought, should you really be laughing? You've seen this about 20 times.
It never gets old.
Aren't you over it?
It never gets old. It's so fresh and new, and it was made, you know, it was finished in 1958, and it still packs such a wallop. It really does.
Yeah.
And what else? And what do you see as something that Marilyn's life experience kind of teaches us?
Well, she was very ambitious, and not in a you know, kind of conceited way. She just really strove to learn more and to be more, and particularly when people told her that maybe she wasn't more. So when she left Hollywood in the mid-50s to try and learn about acting in New York, I mean, she didn't have to do that. She was a huge star at that point, probably the biggest star in Hollywood, perhaps. So, you know, she didn't need to do that, but it was something in her that she wanted to be more, to learn more. She wanted to be serious about acting, and she could have wrote on comedies and musicals for all of her career.
It takes a lot of humility. It does, for a big star to go back to the basics of acting, or wanting to establish more depth. It's risk taking too, because her performances in comedy satisfied her audience, but didn't necessarily satisfy her. So to go into the direction of heavy drama, or to just increase the depth and texture of her comedy, people had opinions about that and attitudes of that. Not everyone supported it. Some people thought it was pretentious, but she didn't care. She wanted to refine and hone herself. She had a very clear path of what she wanted to do. So as the leader of Immortal Marilyn, and the title of your organization really captures this fascination that we have with this woman that seems to go on forever. I don't think it'll ever end. So immortal was really the perfect word to choose. How you know, what is it like on a day-to-day basis to kind of manage this fan base, and to become an administrator to this very active group with how many members?
I haven't looked at the number in a few days, but it's close to 30,000.
That's huge.
I
That's
know.
huge.
I'm always kind of surprised when I look at the number. But yeah, it's every time I log in. Oh, and there's a group of us. It's not just me. I don't want anybody to think I'm a one-woman show.
It takes a lot. It takes a
Um,
village.
yes.
Shout out to your team.
Yes.
Who's
Other
on your team?
administrators. Well, Leslie Kaspirowitz, who had previously led the helm, she is an administrator. Rebecca Swift and Claire Stevenson, they are both in the UK.
Mm.
And Tara Hanks is as well, sorry, and Mary Jane Gray. And so amongst the group of us, we will, all of our posts are subject to approval, and that's to make, well, we have certain rules about the posts because we want to keep Marilyn authentic. So we don't allow photoshops or even colorizations in most cases, or anything that's been filtered, because that's been coming up a lot lately.
And a lot of the false quotes too.
Yes, yeah.
Which seems to really be attributed to Marilyn more than probably any other celebrity. These false quotes.
Yes, and it leaves you very suspicious, doesn't it, when you see anything? What was the other thing I thought? Oh, and also there are some photos of blondes who sometimes you know who they are, sometimes you don't, and they're labeled as Marilyn. So we want to make sure that they don't go through, and we're able to put in a little note saying, oh, this photo was photoshopped, or, this is not Marilyn, and that kind of thing, so that the member knows what happened.
How many hours do you dedicate in a day or to a week?
It varies, and I've never counted them. I would say I probably devote at least, I'll say an hour and a half a day for sure. I have other jobs that pay me.
Of course, yeah.
So, I need to fit it in. But there are other days when I might not have anything on the go, and I'm there all afternoon and part of the evening, so it's all wherever it fits in, basically.
And I have a connection to Immortal Marilyn through Leslie Kaspirowitz and Mary Jane Gray, in that they appeared with me as panel members on the Good Night Marilyn radio show for about 3 seasons. And they brought an enormous amount of information about Marilyn to that show, which what made it so exceptional. They really dispelled lots of myths, and I think really promoted Marilyn to the audience. That radio show now appears as a podcast, and it's gotten over 1 million hits over the years.
Oh, wow, really?
And then you and I go back to the Avalon, which was the Beverly Carlton?
In Beverly Hills.
Where Marilyn had a unit that she rented there. And I remember I had a book signing event at the Immortal Marilyn pool party, and you won the framed images of my volume 1 and 2 book cover. So there's great photos of us standing with those. And then afterwards, we all gathered in Marilyn's unit where the famous Philippe Halsman photograph that everybody knows, the April 7th, 1952 cover of Life, in the corner between the wall of her restroom and her closet doors, in the white off-the-shoulder sheath dress. And so we spent some time. So I think we toasted Marilyn that night. You were sitting on the area which would have been her bed. And we couldn't believe that we were in that space, could we?
No, it was incredible. And it was so small. That was the thing that, when because the pictures don't tell you, the pictures that were taken of Marilyn. And they had shifted furniture around to make it kind of look more spacious. It was a tiny room. It was the size of a bedroom, basically.
Yes, it was. And we remember her bed it was kind of studio style with like a twin or even a single bed pushed up against the wall. And she had
Right.
all of her shelves with her books, her picture of Doucet, her
Yes.
I think her Michelangelo of the creation of man, God and Adam's fingers. We know the shot of the window where she's standing and
Yes.
posing by the window or sitting in the chair by the window. And it does give the illusion that this is a full apartment when this is just a little studio efficiency with no kitchenette.
No. Yes. Yeah, it was bedroom and a tiny bathroom. And
I remember her weight set, pictures of her doing,
oh,
the bench
yes.
press that was in there at some point, lots of
Yeah.
books and records and a record player. And so
Mhm.
what was it like for you to be in that space that Marilyn had inhabited so early in her career, really at the brink of her great fame? In 1952, she appeared in so many films. What was that
Right.
like for you to be in that space?
It's very surreal, you know. I remember there was chatter going on all around us because there was 10 of us, maybe something like that, squished into that room.
We are live at the Beverly Hills Carlton Hotel, which is now called the Avalon Hotel, and we're in Marilyn's unit toasting her with Dom Perignon champagne. And this is the group of wonderful people who love Marilyn who are here with us. Everybody toast Marilyn.
Wait, not everybody has champagne yet.
Everybody's...
Lorraine.
And...
Right, to Marilyn. To Marilyn. To Marilyn.
to Marilyn.
And I remember there were times when I was only barely listening because I was just kind of looking around and trying to picture, what it was like to actually live in that room. I had been to other places where Marilyn had been, but not where she'd lived, not inside a place that she'd lived. So that was very unusual. It's funny to think about because much as she was dreaming and hoping for, I don't know if she really knew for sure that she was about, no, she couldn't have, that she was about to be as famous as she became. Even I think in all her aspirations, she never quite saw that, what it turned out to be. And,
What do you wish I'm sure she looks down upon her legacy and her millions of fans who love her so passionately. What do you think is her reaction to that somewhere, wherever she is?
She would have to be astounded, really, considering the passage of time. And you don't, in her day, you never would have thought of things like owning a copy of a film, your average individual owning a copy of a film, much less an entire collection, and seeing a movie 50 times if you choose to. Back then you had to go to the theater or you saw it on TV if it happened to come on. So that it's like a whole completely different concept.
That's a really good point. Yeah, the way we watch movies and how integrated they become in our lives now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, look at even if you were relying just on television, look at all the channels we have.
Exactly.
Completely beyond anything that she would have imagined, I'm sure.
And if you were to meet her, what would you say to her?
I guess I would just kind of have to thank her. It's hard to explain to somebody who, I know that you would understand, but it's hard to explain to other people how one person could be so significant. And it's even when I'm not reading about her and maybe I haven't seen a movie of hers in a few months, she's always kind of there.
That's what happens when you discover Marilyn and she creeps into your heart.
Yeah.
She remains there forever.
Yes. And my relationship with her has brought many unusual things to my life. Not the least of which is the wonderful people I've met. And if I had never gone to Los Angeles, I still would have met, in a virtual sense, many interesting and lovely people. But the experience of actually going there, which I probably would have on my first trip, my sister was living there. So, I'm sure I would have visited her anyway, of course. But, then there was the added appeal of Hollywood, and I was always a big movie fan. But I wanted to time the visit with the Memorial Week, and that was an entirely different experience.
And for those who don't know, Immortal Marilyn has routinely hosted Memorial
Events,
Weeks
yeah.
in Los Angeles. And is that done in a specific time period? Is that something done every year or every 5 years?
Well, the club Marilyn Remembered since 1982, I believe.
Yes.
I think, is it? Okay, good. Have hosted a memorial service in the cemetery where she is encrypted and in the chapel where her funeral took place. So that's every August 5th, that kind of thing. But that week, people will travel in for the service and other events. So Immortal Marilyn tucks in some events of their own during the week as well. And then, because the service is open to the public, it's not strictly for one club, so anybody can attend. So anybody seeing this who is interested, maybe not next year, I'm not sure, but eventually,
unprecedented times, yeah.
Eventually, you will be able to go, I hope.
2 more years. So now that you're at the helm of Immortal Marilyn, what can we expect? What might be coming down the pike in terms of the website or any other events?
I'm kind of continuing with what we've already had in place. So that includes, we fundraise for flowers for Marilyn to be delivered to the crypt. And I know before I was ever in Los Angeles, that was a very special thing to me, because I made, it might have just been a very small contribution, but it all adds up. And to see our arrangement there and my name on a little card was always very exciting. So
it allows
we
people to be a part of this.
Yes,
yeah, it allows
and
many
the physical
people to
part of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So thank you, Betsy, for your first social media interview. Now that you're at the helm of the great fan club, Immortal Marilyn, I'm so glad that you've joined us. I thank you. I know that Marilyn smiled down upon you for all the good work you do in her honor. So with that, thanks to everyone for joining us with Betsy Brett today. Make sure you hold a good thought for Marilyn and hold a good thought for yourself.